Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Star Wars Stuff podcast, where we talk all things Star Wars. My name is Colin,
And I'm Brooke.
and today we are going to be talking about Tales of the Jedi and the new episode of Andor, and our experience with Ashley Eckstein that we just had yesterday over at Barnes and Noble. It was super, super exciting. Without further ado, let's break down the news. All right, so at 3 a.m. Eastern time and 12 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Tales of the Jedi came out. Some of the information about the episode titles were wrong. That came out from different fan sites, and that's okay. And the run times were also a lot longer than I thought they were going to be, because I think there was a couple of fan sites that were saying that a couple of the episodes would be like around 10 minutes long, and there was no episode that was. I think each episode was around at least 15 minutes long, and I think the
It
longest
seemed
one that we
like
got.
whatever the guest time was, each one was like a good few more minutes longer
Yes.
than
Yep.
what we expected, which was a pleasant surprise.
Yes, it was. And what made this series so great was that it was tying in to the events of the shows and movies, especially pretty much during the prequel era. The episodes with Count Dooku, the first two are happening before the events of Phantom Menace, and then the last episode with Count Dooku is happening during the events of the Phantom Menace, and then directly after. So that was really cool to experience. All the Ahsoka stuff was phenomenal. Uh,
Oh yeah.
Yep. And going forward, spoiler alerts. So if you have not seen Tales of the Jedi or Andor, it's a Star Wars Day. It's Wednesday. So I would go and just, after you're done with work, after you're, hitting the gym or something, just go out and watch it. It's a great watch. Uh, for us, we woke up at 3 a.m. and when we watched everything at once. So, but yeah. So let's dive into it. So the first episode of Tales of the Jedi is Ahsoka, and then episode 2, 3, and 4 are Count Dooku, and then the last two episodes are Ahsoka. So all of
I
the
will
episodes are in
say,
chronological order.
yeah, that's definitely why they did it. I just felt that it was a tad odd because we start with Ahsoka and then we have all of Count Dooku and then we finish off with Ahsoka. Like, I know it was chronological order, but it almost felt a little odd to me that they had them in that order.
Yeah, yeah. I was very excited because this is an era that we really haven't explored that much of. We kind of knew what happened with Dooku. We already know what happens to Ahsoka, except of course of all the way to the end of the sequels, where we don't know where she is in that timeline, except when we hear her voice in Rise of Skywalker. But all the stuff with Count Dooku was brand new, and seeing younger characters was very exciting to me. Of seeing Mace Windu, and we'll definitely dive into that because there's some seeds planted, and you feel more sympathy for Dooku leaving the Order and everything. Uh, but how about we dive into that first episode with Ahsoka? Uh, we see her
Little
parents.
baby. Little
Yeah.
baby Ahsoka.
hmm we see her parents. We see more of her people,
Mhm.
and we uh, I it, I really enjoyed of learning more about Ahsoka's culture, because the only time that we really learned about her culture was in the Clone Wars, when she actually goes back and she sees her people and they go on a rescue mission because some of her people get are captured and they get forced into slavery and everything. I What was your favorite part about that first episode? Because
About
that was
that
like the real
episode.
origin, yeah, that really was like the real origin of Ahsoka. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, of
Well, it
those
was
like seeds
interesting
were
to
planted of her being
see
a Jedi. So
that she was force sensitive starting at 1 year old. Like, I guess I don't know like when the typical age is that people start showing, but that just seems so young. And
It
it was cool
changes.
to
Yeah.
see. Yeah, does it kind of depend on the person?
Well, I mean, because if you look at Luke Skywalker, like he really didn't start. I mean, as canon wise, like we really didn't see him start showing until much later on in age,
Yeah.
and Leia started showing. We saw her, kind of using her
Hmm.
force abilities in Obi-Wan Kenobi, where she like sensed her
Right.
sensed what
But
was really going on with her
she's
cousin and
still a
everything.
little, I mean, she's still a child, but she's
Yeah.
still older. She's definitely not 1 year old.
No.
Um, so yeah, so that was cool. And it was cool to see her people a little more. They seem to be very, very spiritual people.
Yep.
It also just seemed like they have such a quaint little village. They're just doing their stuff. Chill.
I was hoping that that we would have had more of a longer episode of that, of where we saw maybe it has some years passed,
Yes, I would have
and then
loved to
Plo Koon
see
comes in
Plo
and
Koon.
like yeah.
I will say I mean, obviously they were made to be shorts, but like I find myself with each one being like, dang, like I really wish we got a little bit more, like a little bit more. Like
Yeah.
I said, with this one, I wish we could have seen Plo Koon come. And we can talk with each one. Like I just need a little bit more, a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's me being selfish.
No, no, no. I am 100% with you. Because after that, I mean, because her going through that ordeal, which it was really funny because the creature that Ahsoka's mom shoots looks like a antelope and a kangaroo. It
Yeah,
was like a
that was a
mixture of that
weird
species.
creature. That was something I think we all reacted to. We were
Yeah.
like, "What is that?"
And then she was like, uh you know what? I will carry you and I'll carry the creature. And I was like,
Yeah, talk about some mom power. I
yeah, I
was
was
like,
like,
first off,
okay.
you're gonna go hunt with your 1 year old baby strapped to you, and then you're gonna
Yeah.
carry that thing on top of
Yeah.
it. I was like, you go, girl.
Yep. Um, we didn't really get the name of the lion creature thing, but that thing was like a tiger, it was a bear,
It
like the
was
thing was
it was
massive.
huge.
Yeah.
Yes, I would have been terrified if that came up on me.
Right. Uh, but something else as well is that I think it was I feel like the creature was more logical than it was appearing, because I feel like in most like animal instinct and everything, of what we've seen depicted like in different movies and shows and stuff like that, is like the creature will go directly for the kill. And the fact that I just picked up Ahsoka like after the village comes in and tries to
Mhm.
save the mom and Ahsoka, that it just picks up Ahsoka and it runs into the forest. That kind of threw me off, because you normally don't see you know
Well, I'm thinking it could
something
be
like
kind
that.
of one of two things. One, if it was desperate enough and like obviously it can't like eat her right there, it's going to grab her and run away from the people attacking it so that it can then have its dinner. Or two, they needed that for cinematic effect because obviously it can't eat
Right.
her.
Yeah. I mean, and
Those were my two assumptions
yeah.
of why that's what happened.
And that's something else as well, is like you can't put logic into Star Wars. It's just something that
Right. Sometimes you just gotta accept that, like, yeah, that's how it's gotta
yeah.
be.
Yeah. And so that was super cool to see her kind of do the same thing that Ezra does in Rebels,
Hmm.
where he connects with the creatures, and it's not like they're doing mind control, but they're actually like connecting with it, understanding it,
Yes.
and that's exactly what Ahsoka did. Seeing her ride the giant tiger bear creature thing and into the village was pretty intimidating, and seeing the size of it was just
Oh.
like wow.
Could you imagine being like her parents in the village, seeing her riding the thing back in and being like,
What?
excuse
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Flabbergasted.
Yeah, and then them, saying that Ahsoka is Jedi, and then you just kind of cut to black. It's like, okay, so how do they know about the Jedi? Because it sounds like they are kind of that exclusive community where they don't leave the planet. That is what it looked like, where they weren't on the level where they have like technology than other civilizations do. So I'm really curious of what happened next, and did they call and say, "Hey, like a uh we have a Jedi here," or were they using the holocron at that point that has the list of all the
Mhm.
has a list of all the names of the future force sensitive children, because
Well,
that
we don't know because they could have
because
given us 5 more minutes.
right. Right, exactly. So I'm
5 more.
curious if that holocron existed at that point, um or it was or the holocron maybe got um that the holocron came to be later. I mean, I could see it maybe existing all the way from the old Republic
Mhm.
days to the High Republic, but yeah, I really enjoyed that episode. And then just jumping from that to the corrupt um uh look at the Republic and the Count Dooku episodes was very, very sad to see, but you also feel sympathy because of the next episode. You jump in and Count Dooku and young Qui-Gon, which is voiced by Liam Neeson's son. And then we find out later when we see in the third episode of the Count Dooku arc, when we see Qui-Gon, that Liam Neeson is like officially back for that. So the fact they're using his likeness and everything is super, super cool. But I was a big fan of seeing Dooku just not, he was not uh tied down by the rules of the Jedi, and he was teaching that to Qui-Gon pretty much, except
He was more of being like going with his
yeah,
moral standards, like what he felt was right versus what the council may prefer.
right. So I liked how they showed the kind of darker side of the Republic, and we kind of saw that in the Clone Wars and everything, and the corruption. But the fact that they went to the extent of showing like how desperate a society can get to where they have to kidnap someone just to prove a point.
Right,
That
because you would you see those people and did they confirm what planet that was? I don't remember if they mentioned the name.
you know,
But they looked terrible. They were so thin. They looked like death.
yeah,
Imagine, like, I just can't imagine a senator allowing that to happen.
yeah,
And I thought it was even more funny when they do get to the senator's son that they've kidnapped. And he's like, he's just chilling. He's like upset. He is upset for the people, not that he's kidnapped. He is upset that the people, like his people, are suffering so much and that his dad has allowed this to happen. And I was like, oh, interesting. That's not what I was expecting.
no. Uh, and that also, in a way, because we really haven't seen it before, but when they're actually walking in the village, you see a dog, like not like a space hybrid or anything, like a like alien creature hybrid. Like it was an actual like dog.
I feel
And
like it looked a little off. It
yeah,
definitely
but
looked
like
dog like, definitely
yeah,
canine like.
yeah, I think that's the closest that we'll ever get to an actual dog in Star Wars, because
Mhm.
if it's just like in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I remember watching the Desolation of Smog, and we end up seeing those two. There's two pugs just kind of run past screen. I'm like, oh, I guess there's dogs in Middle Earth. But yeah, that's the same with Star Wars now. But yeah, they end up walking into the pub, and they end up, asking of what's going on, and Count Dooku just does not hesitate. He's like, I'm going to make my intentions clear, and he does like the whole kind of sheriff, well, not sheriff of,
Sets the lightsaber on the table
yeah,
and is like, "This is what you're dealing with. Tell me what I want to know."
right, and that's not the traditional Jedi way. And Qui-Gon doesn't even like he's not even shocked like he did that. He's just like, oh, okay, all right, cool. Um, and we kind of see that those teachings from Count Dooku and the Phantom Menace like towards him because of the way that Qui-Gon handles the whole situation with Anakin on Tatooine and talking to the Queen, of just his mannerisms. It honestly makes sense that Dooku was his master, and you definitely see it in the show, and this episode. But they end
Well,
up
I
going.
think, yeah,
Sorry,
I just think something that Dooku kind of taught him is to like kind of like think critically and not just completely blindly follow the Jedi Order.
orders, yeah.
He kind of taught, like, not that Dooku turned out to be a great person, but he kind of led the way for Qui-Gon to kind of think a little more critically and not kind of like blind follow.
Right. Yep. It's something that you really don't see in other Jedi. Like you mainly see that in Dooku and Count Dooku, and you
So Ahsoka,
yeah, oh yeah, and in
and
Ahsoka as
even
well.
kind of Anakin also.
Yeah, but it's funny because then Obi-Wan kind of feels like the black sheep, because if we haven't seen his story yet. Maybe in season 2 of Tales of the Jedi, we like see like a younger Obi-Wan, and he's on the run with Satine and everything. That would be really, really cool, and I think the fans will love that. But you really don't see him like that. He is very defiant in a way towards those actions, because every time that we see Anakin act like that, Obi-Wan scolds him. He like then later throughout the Clone Wars, he kind of lets things slide and everything. But I love that we are seeing more of the corrupt, and not so much of the we are seeing the darker side of the light side, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
not everything is black and white. Like
Yes, that is something that I kind of love that Star
There's that
Wars is
gray
kind
area.
of diving into, is that even like these episodes with Dooku, like obviously like his methods were not great. He was
No.
not at the end of it a good person, but I felt like I understood him more because he also was played by Palpatine. I think at his core he kind of felt like he was doing the right thing. Again, his methods weren't good, but like so much it's very realistic for things not to just be black and white. Like in real life, it's not always clear like who the quote unquote good guys are and who the right people are. It's
Yeah.
kind of there's a lot of gray area. So I love that these episodes kind of showed us more of that, and they did. They kind of like I always just thought like, oh, Dooku, he's 100% evil, awful. But after watching these episodes with him, I was like, oh, I like kind of understand him now a bit more, and he's not quite as evil as I thought. Obviously, again, I'm not condoning his methods. He did some bad stuff, but I have a better understanding.
Yep. And I am hoping that we see more. More of that in different shows later, and I think we'll definitely see stuff like that in the Ahsoka series, because Ahsoka's on that level as well, and she was so hesitant to train Grogu and all of that stuff because of she's seen the worst of the worst. She survived the worst
Yes,
of the worst.
absolutely.
Yep. And I'm hoping that we get more flashbacks in that live action. Would love to see it. But yeah. And then we then see them go to the barn. They like talk to the son. He's very
He's
sickened.
mad.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
he's
mad.
mad.
He is disgusted with the way that his father has treated the people of his planet, and and we we go to Coruscant a lot. We also have a lot of name drops of Coruscant and how the senators like to hide there, and it just sounds like they don't really like they represent their planets, but it doesn't sound like they fully know, what's exactly going on, or if they do, they are trying to um benefit off of the misery that's happening to the people of the planet. And that happens in this episode that we're talking about now and the next episode as well. And it sounds like it's a very common thing. And this really hits Dooku, and he gets to a point where he doesn't want to be part of the Jedi because they've lost their way. And it seems like all they do is they
Hmm.
serve the Senate, and they're
They're
not
kind of
serving
like
the people of the
they're
Republic.
turning a blind eye to the corrupt senators. Like obviously, we've got some good senators, but some bad ones. And the Jedi aren't necessarily doing anything about it because it's not their place. And
Yeah.
he's like, this is not okay. And we kind of have to agree with him on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we then have one of the other people from the village come in and say, "Hey, they're here. It's the senator. He's not happy." They walk outside, and the senator, ends up paying one of the people from the village, for the services because someone in the village, told
Yes,
on
kind
them.
of.
Yep.
In which was just so heartbreaking to see is that the other villagers didn't um, blame her for it. The one was like, she's literally starving. Like none of them were mad at this girl for
No.
ratting them out because they understand that they're on the brink of death. Like,
Yeah. And Dooku, he says no to standing aside, and there ends up being a shootout. They turn in their lightsabers, which Dooku's lightsaber looks so slick. And now his lightsaber is his light side version is available uh, uh, over on Shop Disney. So and most likely it will come to Galaxy's Edge here in a couple of months. But they turn on their lightsabers. They end up having a fight, and it looks like all hope is lost. And then Dooku just loses it. He ends up choking the senator, and the senator is not innocent in this at all. Like he is admitting that he knows what's going on here on the planet, but he doesn't care, and he just wants his son back, and it might be blinded by love and stuff, but also it's like he was not innocent. He knew exactly what was going on with his people and everything, but Dooku loses it because he sees that he just doesn't care, and the senator also says that that your job is to serve the Senate. So there's a lot of people in the Senate that are like, you are serving the Senate, but in reality, they are supposed to serve the Republic. And
the
Dooku just
people.
loses it.
Mhm.
Yep. So he runs up. He starts to force choke him. Qui-Gon, is like, all right, this has gone too far.
He's
He
like,
runs.
this has gone too far.
Yep. And he and he runs back to the barn. He frees the son. The son comes back, saves his dad, and Qui-Gon kind of brings him back before Dooku can do anything, before he goes too far. And then at the end of the episode, the village is doing their best to rebuild, and the son is promising the people of the village that he's going to make things right, and he will try undo the wrongs that his father has done.
And it was just so interesting because like while the son is like, I'm gonna help you, the senator himself is sitting in his car, we'll call it a car, and
Looking
he's just not saying a
guilty.
word.
Yeah.
He looks just like he just had his world shattered, and he's just silent.
I mean, a line that Qui-Gon actually says in the Phantom Menace is greed can be a powerful ally. And that is a really good line because the senators of the Republic have a duty to their planets and to their people, but they can also be blinded by that power and greed, and they become corrupt and they use that for their own benefit. And we see that a lot through the Clone Wars. We're seeing it here, and the Jedi, I think most of them are so blinded by not the power that they have, but of just of following the code and everything, and that definitely restricts them from doing things that they should be doing. But because their code is so strict, they can't do it. It's kind of like this Covia Accords in Marvel, where you had the Civil War begin between Iron Man and Captain America, because Captain America was like, if I follow these rules, there's a chance that we might not be able to do what we need to do, and it's because we are being restricted. And that's kind of what the Jedi code is. It is holding you back from doing things that may be right, but in the eyes of the Jedi, there is a more peaceful solution. And Dooku is starting to see through these episodes all the way to the end that that the code is stopping them from real peace and order. And Dooku at the end of the episode does thank Qui-Gon, is like, hey, I appreciate you helping me out and everything. Sometimes I think you are a wiser Jedi than me. And then they walk to the ship and the episode ends. I really enjoyed the episode. I thought that was a great way to introduce, of the corruption that we later see in the prequels and everything, and in the Senate, and just seeing young Qui-Gon was awesome. That made me so happy, and the fact that Liam Neeson's son gets to carry on that Qui-Gon legacy, and he had the chance to do this with his dad is awesome. So cool. Yep. And then we end up going into the next episode, which I thought that it was very interesting that Windu and Dooku were partnered together, because they're like complete opposites, and it sounds like that they were friends. And I don't know if Mace Windu and Dooku were around the same age, but from early on you can definitely see that Windu is a Boy Scout. Like, he is following the rules to the T, and Dooku even calls him out on it. He's like, I admire how much you follow the rules, but honestly, it's kind of annoying that you're doing that, and it's maddening to me. And you see them land on the planet. They are going there because a Jedi, which we found out later, it's not really said in the beginning, but later we found out that she was actually a Jedi on the Jedi Council. Can't think of her name, and I think her species might be the same as Luminara, but she
looked the same as Luminara. Yes.
Yeah. And they get there, and in the military they have on the planet, they're like gloves. I don't know if it was their fingers or gloves, but they had like these large talons.
I think it was like their gloves. It was almost like Black Panther. Like they had like claws attached to their gloves, and these very interesting helmets as well, very like angular.
Yeah. So I am hoping that we see more planets like this that are not that traditional as Coruscant and other species. Because if you look at Andor, there's not that many aliens in that show. So I'm hoping to see more uh, more species. But we find out that the Jedi Master passed away, and it was because she was going with the senator of the planet, and the mission doesn't go that well. And they get ambushed, and she ends up getting killed. And he warned her that would probably happen if they went together. And we later find out that that was a lie, and it was the Senate guard that, again, was trying to stop the corruption that a senator was causing, because the senator was, using the pain and suffering of the planet to their advantage, and they were trying to make a profit of it by bringing different companies in, and they were mining the planet and different things, and the senator was making money off it while the people of his planet were suffering. And that's a theme that keeps happening in this, and it was very sad because no one had to die, but out of fear from the guards, a Jedi got killed. And I think something else as well that is a theme in this is communication. Like, these people were afraid that they weren't going to get the answer that they wanted, but and they just thought that no one's listening to them. But in reality, all they had to do is speak up, and someone would have. But the Jedi apparently have, during this time period, have a reputation that that things are not as they seem, and that the Jedi are just the lapdogs of the Senate, and they only serve the Senate, and that's the reputation that they get.
Yep, which is why the Jedi Master wound up getting killed, because the guard who they questioned, they were like, "This has nothing to do with her. Why did you kill her? You're mad at your senator." And he was like, "But you guys work to protect them. Like, that's your job. Like, that's what you do. Like, you're right. They have a reputation of just kind of being the lapdogs of the Senate."
Yep. And they go back to the same place where they were at, of where the ambush happened, and they find out that not everything is the way that it seems, because of the story doesn't line up, and there's no blaster marks in the ship, but there's a lot of damage in the opposite direction. And the whole ambush thing was the whole fight scene was just wild, because the senator tries to save himself, and they end up shooting him, and then Mace and Dooku turn on the lightsabers, and then just a bunch of droids just pop out of nowhere, and they just have a huge brawl, and they cut down a tree. It was awesome action, loved it. And they end up cutting most of all of them down, and then there is, I believe he was the guard's son, or in some relation, that Mace Windu was holding his lightsaber towards, because of when the guard was like, "We'll take you all down. You guys are not what not what you're supposed to be." And he picks up his blaster, and Mace Windu deflects it back, and the other guard kind of goes down to his knees. So it just sounds like maybe there was some type of father-son relationship of some sorts there. But then we, find out why, and it's because of the senator was being corrupted. And then Mace and Dooku were like, well, actually, Dooku is silent during this, and Mace is doing most of the talking. He's like, "If you just talked to her, she was a Jedi, she would have listened to you." But then he's like, "Well, you guys are just the lapdogs. From my point of view, all you guys are doing is just, not great things, and you just follow the Senate without question." And that kind of, makes Dooku think, and he's like, "I didn't agree with all of your methods, but at the same time, I think you had every right to defend your planet and your community." And then as they're walking back to the ship, to take the Jedi Master back to Coruscant. Dooku, is asking Windu if uh, if he thinks that the Jedi Council um, will get better if they keep following the path of the Senate and everything. And Mace Windu says in a very blunt way, he's like, I mean, that's not really my call. That's not my decision. We are just gonna follow the council and we'll just do what they tell us to do. And you can see Dooku being like, okay, well, you are part of the problem. You are part of the of the corruption. And they end up going back to the planet.
Like, I don't want to say like mindless per se, but just kind of like, again, that blind follow, like just being like, yeah, we're just gonna do what the council says, like no questions asked. It's just kind of like, maybe some critical thinking there would do you some good there, Mace. You know?
Yeah. Yep. And then we end up, and then we, later see him walk over to, we see him walk over to the temple. He grabs Windu when he's talking to all the other Jedi. He walks. Dooku calls the name and he's like, "Hey, so I heard that you are taking her spot in the council." And Mace Windu's like, "Oh, well, yeah, because I took her spot because I followed the orders of the council and you didn't."
It felt very manipulative to me, the way he said it.
Yeah.
And like, I personally have never been a big Mace Windu fan.
Yeah.
No, it's just, I just never really liked him as a person. I always felt he was kind of just overly arrogant and just kind of like, he just always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And especially when he was like talking to Dooku of all people and just saying like, yeah, like you kind of went against the council and I was a good little boy and followed the rules, so I got the spot. Like that's kind of the vibe I got. And I was like, "Ooh, that did not sound good to me. That sounded a little weaselly coming from Mace Windu."
Well, I mean, on top of that, you also see him in the Clone Wars and in the prequels where it's not like he's blinded by power, but it's just like
he's self-righteous.
Yes,
like he always just kind of feels like, ugh. And I just, that's such a, I can't stand self-righteous people. So just
I'm just glad that he never got to the level of Pong Krell. Do you remember who that is?
Oh gosh, yeah. So he wasn't that bad.
Oh no. But yeah. And then we see the episode end. Great episode. Again, all of the seeds are like planted of him.
Just really makes you think too. Like it just like, all my like ideas that I already had like set in my head about certain characters, I'm suddenly kind of being like, so I didn't know this. So that kind of makes me think differently about that.
Right.
Just I kind of love it. I love being challenged that way. And like just getting such like people are so complex. Characters are my favorite things about like movies and books and things. Like I just dive so deeply into like the characters and I love when they're complicated.
I agree. Because of the next episode, leads directly into him turning to the dark side. And that was something that we knew that was going to happen, but we've never actually seen it happen. So I was really excited to see everything go down, and my theory about Yaddle was definitely right, because we don't see her at the end of the Phantom Menace, and we don't see her later. And then it used to be old canon that she survived Order 66, but they definitely changed that. But we see in the beginning of this episode, we see Dooku walking through the Jedi library, and he goes in the back of
very sneaky, like very sneaky.
He walks in the
he's
back.
Kind of like he's doing something.
Yep, and he goes in the archives and he erases the planet Camino, and we learn at this point that the timeline
Well,
with
because he
Mas-
types in a code first, and it says, "Welcome,
Master
Master Sifo-Dyas," and I was
Diaz.
like,
So,
"Oh."
yep.
And then
So
he
at
pulls up Camino, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, he's erasing it. This is it. This is who and how
yeah,
Camino got erased from the
yeah.
database." So that
All,
was cool to see. Honestly, I was like, "Oh,
all of us on the couch were just like, oh, get
that's what's happening."
right. And I didn't think we would see any of that. And the fact that the show has given us the opportunity to see things that have been talked about for a very long time is awesome. And then we see him walk back through the library, and he sees Joe
There's a lot of
Costanza.
talk going on, like a lot of
Yep.
talk going on. And he's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"What's going on? What's happening?"
And then we find out later this is happening during the events of the Phantom Menace, because she says that your apprentice, Qui-Gon, has run into his Sith Lord on Tatooine. It's like, oh, this is happening during the events. And then in the next scene,
Yeah.
we see Qui-Gon Jinn walking with Yaddle, which is played by Bryce Dallas Howard. And this might cause some controversial stuff because she's not talking like Yoda. Like, she is talking in a normal accent. So now it's like, why does Yoda talk the way that he talks? Because for a while, a lot of people thought that, like,
because we've never heard anyone else from his species speak. So we kind of assumed it was like a species thing. But now, since Yaddle is not speaking this way, it is solely a Yoda thing. And so we were
Yep.
kind of like, we were throwing back and forth, like maybe it's kind of like, like people have different like dialects, like maybe that's just how some of them talk. Because, speech is a learned thing.
Yeah.
Like, so again, just kind of raises more questions about their species and where they're from, what they're about.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll have some of the mystery solved in Mandalorian season 3, because there are some rumors revolving around that. So we'll have to wait and see. But they are walking down the hallway. Liam Neeson's back as Qui-Gon. He's talking. He's just like, man, I guess that news spreads fast. And then we see, and then we have Dooku walk up. He talks to Yaddle Qui-Gon. It's like, did the council believe you? And he was like, no, not really. And you can definitely right. And you can definitely tell Yaddle's at that stage where she's just like, I mean, I want to be on the council's side, but also at the same time,
right. Her little comment cracked me up because they're like semi talking a little bad about the council, and little Yaddle's like, well, as someone who's on the council, it just like the way she said it just kind of made me crack up a little bit.
Yeah. And we see and then we see Qui-Gon and Dooku, say goodbye. In reality, it's their last goodbye. And Dooku kind of stares at the elevator and just like is just kind of thinking about life. Which and just everything
that I never realized that like Dooku hadn't quite like gone to the dark side fully during like the Phantom Menace. So it was just kind of interesting. Like Qui-Gon died not knowing.
No,
it's just something like something that I did not know personally. No. It just kind of made me think about that a little bit. Like, oh, that's interesting.
Yep. And then we have him, and then we have Yaddle sensing something is wrong, and she's like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And he's
with
like,
Dooku, she's like, "You feel off, man.
Yeah,
you want to talk about it?"
and he's just standing there, and he's like, they grow up so fast and all that stuff, and they walk away. They walk the separate ways.
Like a dad moment.
Yeah. And then the screen goes black, and then you go back to the same tree that we see in the Clone Wars a decent amount, like in the courtyard, and sad music is playing now. Of the music that was playing, it reminded me a lot of season 7 of the Clone Wars, of where it was the last 4 episodes, and it was the episode where Order 66 happens, and Ahsoka and Rex are getting taken Maul onto the cruiser and like all that stuff.
You knew something tragic happened, and you kind of were pretty sure that Qui-Gon had just died.
Right. And we also learn more about like of finding out that Qui-Gon was born in Coruscant, and
Yeah, I didn't know that.
right. So I was like, oh, cool,
Hello,
awesome,
Coruscant native.
yeah. And the fact that that we learn more about the timeline as well, be because of Yaddle says the council is getting ready to go to Naboo for the funeral. Are you coming? And Dooku's like, I'm not going to be pleasant company. I shouldn't go. And she was like, are you going to be able to let you know are you going to be able to deal with the passing of Qui-Gon and everything? And he's like, I have no other choice. And then he walks away. But Yaddle is very suspicious, um, and she's also very wise. And you see Dooku go to the temple hangar. He gets in the ship. He goes off. Do you think Yaddle was doing her Jedi duty, or do you think Yaddle was, trying to be a good friend and make sure that he was okay?
I have a feel a little bit of both. I think
Okay.
it was a little bit of both. I think she was genuinely concerned for a fellow Jedi, but then also I think her senses were telling her that something bigger was wrong here. So I definitely think it was a little bit of both that drove her to follow him.
Yeah. Yep. And then we see them go to the same area that they do in Attack of the Clones, and we also see that it's a very worn down area of
Probably off the beaten track kind of deal, like, you know.
of Coruscant. It's very torn down. It doesn't look like people have been over there in a very long time. Maybe during the High Republic era, that was more of a civilized era, like area, and then something happened, and then it got worn down, and people kind of left the area. Something maybe happened over there that we don't know about yet in history, and something revolving around the dark side. Maybe that's why no one goes to that side of the planet, but that's what draws the Emperor and Dooku and them over there. That's my theory anyway. But we see them go over, and also I don't know how Dooku doesn't see a ship following him, because Yaddle's not that far behind. And I
So
don't know
I
how,
actually think about that a lot in Star Wars when
yeah.
people are following others. I'm like, are they just I don't know. To me, like I feel like I would notice, but also maybe they're just not looking behind them. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I guess.
they're just
Yeah. And then we see them park the vehicles. Yaddle shuts off the ship and starts running towards the hangar where Dooku parked, and she goes into hiding, and she's kind of hiding behind a couple of crates in the ship. And you see Dooku talk to Palpatine, and Ian McDermott comes back and voices him. I love that he keeps coming back and he keeps playing this character. Most likely, we'll see him voice him again in Bad Batch season 2, which is going to be in January. On January 4th is when the season 2 premiere is. Super, super exciting. But you see them kind of talk about how Dooku didn't know that Qui-Gon was going to die, and he blames the Emperor for his death. And the Emperor,
yes, he said you went too far.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was not happy.
So then you just see the Emperor being like, well, it's fine. It's fair because my apprentice died too. So boom, we're even. And at that point, it looked like Qui-Gon was, not Qui-Gon, that Dooku was debating on going any further with turning to the dark side, until Yaddle comes around the corner, and then his world shatters because he's like, well, she knows everything now. She was eavesdropping and everything. I can never go back to the way things were. And the fact that the Emperor is kind of that Palpatine's like just kind of like standing there and doing what he normally does, but now like he's in the presence of another Jedi, was very interesting to me, because we've never seen him like in that state, like of where he's publicly talking to someone like that as as Darth
Do you think he
Sidious.
knew Yaddle was there and he just wasn't phased because he knew that either Dooku or himself could defeat her? Like, he just really did not seem phased at all by her being there. And you would think for someone who is literally having this big old master
Yeah.
plan that just got found out, like that, if she escaped, that would have shattered everything. And he just stood there. Didn't even look scared.
I think he was using that as the plot. Like, I mean, I think it was using Yaddle being there as Dooku's trial to being his apprentice to the dark side. Like, that was his final stage of where it's like, all right, I trust you. You have killed a Jedi, because that's what Dooku tries to do with Ventress and Grievous, because of he questions their loyalty throughout the Clone Wars, because Grievous struggles with, actually killing any Jedi, and that's the same thing with Ventress as well, and he definitely gets that from Palpatine, and we see him kind of question everything, and she, is trying to bring him back, and it's like, hey, it's not too late, uh, and uh, and and he's like, you know what, it's time. And then they have the brawl, they like fight, and she then gets to that kind of break in the fight where she's hiding behind the ship, and she's like, hey, listen, I actually left. I actually stepped down from being part of the council because I thought what they were doing was wrong, and Qui-Gon didn't have to die. All we had to do was believe him, and we could have stopped the Sith. We could have stopped all of this. And
I
you
don't think she was telling the truth, though. I think she
well,
was
I was
grasping.
thinking that too. So there are some there are some questions that were answered in the show, but they were also more questions raised, and that's one of them, because it was like, did Yaddle actually step down? Or, I mean, because then that makes sense why she didn't go to Naboo, because she was not there at the end of Phantom Menace. But now going back and watching the Phantom Menace, seeing Yaddle not there is going to be really sad, because you'll be like, oh, well, now we know why she wasn't there. It's because of the fight that happened. And and you see you then have Dooku kind of move the ship away. They like keep fighting, and then she ends up getting on the hangar door, and it's funny because then she's at the same height level as Dooku, because she's up there, so like they can have like a real fight where he doesn't have to bend down or whatever, and then he like force pushes her back, and the door closes, and he thinks that she's dead, and then Palpatine's, at that point he's like, all right, good, rise, my apprentice. And Dooku's like, yes, master, we've seen all that stuff before. But then Yaddle force pushes up the door, and she falls through, and that's kind of like her last.
I would like to see some schematics for that door, because I just don't. I think she should have been smooshed. I know that I think there was like a little crack in there, but
I think there was a gap. But yeah, so you then have her, just kind of being hopeful at the end, being like, you know what, you can't win and stuff like that. And then and she was saying that, like, you are now part of the problem that that you feared that was happening. And then he's like, let me help you rest and fall into peace or something. And then boom, slash. And it's like, all right, well, there's Yaddle. And the very last shot you get is seeing Palpatine's yellow eyes, his smile, and then black. It's like, man, that's that's the Dooku arc of it. And then you see him, later and Attack the Clones, and that leads, into the Clone Wars and everything. I thought his arc was amazing. I wish we had more time with it. It kind of felt rushed, but at the same time, it had to be, because of this wasn't your traditional Clone Wars episode length. It was advertised very early on that these are shorts. but honestly, it was done very well. Of the voice actors, of the animation for the show is phenomenal. I'm very, very impressed over the years how um like how more detailed and
Hmm.
more realistic it looks, because from the last season of the Clone Wars going to the Bad Batch, like the animation is amazing, and then this is just like very, very, very detailed, and I can't wait to see season 2 of the Bad Batch as well. But these were probably my favorite arcs that I've seen in a long time in a Star Wars show, and the
Yeah,
fact
they
that it
were
was dealing with the
very fun,
character,
very cool. Yeah.
yeah. So I was very impressed, and I hope we see more arcs like this with main characters. I think I was just talking about this on our stream that we did for Instagram, but I would love to see a story about Tar Vizsla, the first Mandalorian Jedi. I think that would
Hmm.
be a
Well, because
great,
I think there's just so much question about him
yeah.
and how the dark saber came to be and just all that stuff. So that would be very cool. I think there's a lot of Jedi who would just be very cool to see a little bit more backstory on them, a little more detail.
Yeah.
Dive in deep.
Yeah. And now and then we have the last 2 episodes, which are Ahsoka. Um, let's jump into those. So, how did the
Yes.
next episode start?
I believe it started with, well, Anakin running, first of all. The man was late. Shocker. Um, and so he is running and he runs into a room, and Ahsoka is doing a test. Essentially, she's got some little droids, and a bunch of the Jedi Council is there watching. So I'm assuming it was like one of her final tests. Um, and I believe it was Obi-Wan who said that the little like circle droids were meant to simulate the newest battle droids that they would be facing, and so she destroys them all, does a fantastic job. Fun little cameo we had in there. We had Kanan, little Kanan in there watching her, being all amazed, like, wow, look at her. So that was a fun little cameo.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I mean, obviously she kills it, and it's just interesting because Anakin is just he doesn't look impressed, and she's like, "What's wrong with you? Like, I just passed with flying colors. Why do you look upset?" And he's like, "You know how I feel about these tests." He thinks they're too easy. And I also think that's just him being very overprotective of her. He wants her to succeed and be the best. And so he's like, "You want a real test? I'm going to show you a real test." So they go to, I think we decided it kind of looks like the same place that they were kind of keeping the Xylo Beast from that Clone Wars arc, like kind of like a big open space. And Rex and a few of the other 501st are hanging out in there. And he's like, "Okay, if you can hold up against Rex and his guys, you're going to be able to handle any separatists out there."
And that
And
definitely
so,
foreshadows
oh
the
my gosh, the whole time I was like, "Oh my gosh, the irony of Anakin encouraging her to practice against the clones, and then him being like the ultimate, like the final straw of her literally having to fight the clones for her life."
you actually see her do a spinning move where she jumps off the ground and she does like a twist in
Yeah,
air,
a
and
very
that's the
similar
same
move.
move
Yes.
that she uses to defend herself and when Order
Mm-hmm.
66 is happening.
Yep.
So
Where
there's
she
a
kind of like
lot
escapes
of
into the
foreshadowing in
ceiling.
that.
There was a lot, and it kind of made me emotional. So we see her. She doesn't start off great. They're using stuns, but it takes her a bit. But she after some time, and we can tell the time has passed because it's kind of like a little montage where you're like, he's getting knocked out, getting back up, and then at one point, like she gets back up, and I look and I'm like, she's older, like she has aged. And we go from seeing like Anakin has aged as well. We see him kind of in like his final outfit there. Um, And she finally kind of gets to a point where they're like, yeah, you did it. You held us off. And they're like, yay, we did it. And then
I love the
the
detail of the armor as well,
mhm.
because you can definitely tell the changes of the Clone Wars characters in there and the way their armor looks. It's definitely more detailed, especially the clones. You can actually see like the outline, like
I just love the
yeah,
animation
of the black
style.
areas and
It's
everything on their
just there's so
suits.
much detail, and it's also just very like artistic. Like I love like the like just it looks like brush strokes. Like it's beautiful. I absolutely adore that animation style. So beautiful. Um, and then as we were talking about the foreshadowing of her having to fight the clones, the final scene is her and Rex walking just before like they kind of like she like puts her hands on her head and he kind of like leads her out acting like and he's trying to pull some strings and be like, oh, she's not really a Jedi anymore in
Yeah,
that final arc, like that scene. And they show them walking in and that's where it cuts. And I was like, holy smokes.
yeah.
Emotional.
That was definitely an emotional scene, but not as to me. I feel like the next episode was very emotional.
The next
The
episode, yes.
Because it opens at Padme's funeral, and you actually see more more scenes of the funeral that we've never seen before, and then we also have different perspectives of different characters, including Mothma,
Mhm.
and Beryl or Organa being there at the funeral.
Yes. So something about this final episode with Ahsoka is that it ties into her book. I will say I'm having trouble remembering like everything about the book, but I can tell that it's like inspired by, but not 100% like how the book was. Um, so yeah, so we got to see like she's in the crowd at the funeral, she's got her hood on, and like Bale sees her from like across the way, and she kind of disappears, but he follows her. And we can tell that this has happened like right after everything because she's still wearing her like Siege of
Yep.
Mandalore outfit, like she's still got it on. And so he's talking to her, about everything, and he's like, we still have a fight, we could use you. And he hands her like a communicator and she's like, I'm done fighting, like, her world has just literally shattered. And so she's like, no. And they wind up getting kind of caught by some troopers. She doesn't, but
Yeah.
Bale's kind of like, if you need me.
Yeah.
um and so she leaves with the communicator and she meets up with Rex, so we're pretty sure that they left right from
Oh yeah.
the planet and went straight to the funeral probably.
I'm curious on like how she knew that was happening. Like did she just kind of
Yeah, like how they got the
stumble
news.
upon a broadcast saying, "Hey,
Probably.
this is
That's probably.
Senator Amidala's funeral.
I
This is happening
imagine
at this
the
time."
death of Padme was big news
Oh
across
yeah.
the galaxy.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yes. But then it cuts after her and Rex take off. We unfortunately don't get to see them like part ways. I kind of would have liked to see that, like that conversation of like where they were going to go. But it cuts to her on a planet. And in the book, the planet is, I believe, called Rada that she's on, but they never said it, so I can't confirm that that is, in fact, what
It
they stuck
seems there's a
with.
lot of things in in this episode that don't line up with the book
Yeah,
because you said the
because I
brother
think
and
there was
sister are
some.
supposed to be like sisters.
I recall there being a pair of sisters that
Yeah.
she. It's been a couple years since I read the book. Unfortunately, I should have read up on it before I watched the episode. But I recall there being a pair of sisters because I remember thinking it was ironic that she had the other sisters, the Martez sisters too, and I was like, oh, she keeps getting caught up with sisters. Um, but there is a brother and a sister that she's kind of working with in like a field. And in the book, she just kind of went to a planet. She was just laying low. She was just doing some work, just laying low. So that's what she's doing. She is wearing her mechanic outfit
Yeah.
from the Martez sister arc. So she must have kept that. It was a good look for her apparently. Um, and what happened was they were like stacking some hay, and it fell over. And of course, she saved the girl who was about to get smooshed, and the girl noticed and kind of confronted her like nicely. She didn't know what she was doing. She was like, "Oh my gosh, you're a Jedi," and Ahsoka's like, "What are you saying?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." Like she's like, "Mm." Um, but the brother unfortunately overhears, and we can see it in his eyes. He's gonna rat her out, which he does. And
Mhm.
so when the next day, Ahsoka and the girl they go off to sell the hay in the market. And when they come back, their whole village is just ablaze, and there is a night brother. Excuse me, not a night brother, a inquisitor there, and he's got his double lightsaber. And in the book, she fights him, and that's where she gets her crystals for her white lightsabers. She
Now,
unbleeds them.
okay, so
Yeah,
question about that. Now,
yeah.
in the book, was the fight super quick like it was in the episode, or no?
I would say it wasn't particularly a long fight because she did fight him no weapons. Very similar to how she kind of defeated Maul. She just
Yeah.
like no weapons. She just so I feel like it's probably like it wasn't a super long fight, but it was very quick in the show. But also, she's Ahsoka Tano. She had a ton of training, and I don't know who this Inquisitor was or how trained he was, but she literally just kind of was like, "Nope, grab that lightsaber." I think she decapitated him.
Yeah. We don't get that much time of learning who he is or anything, and the way that
He was kind of a nobody in the book as well. Like he
yeah,
wasn't.
the way that he died too was really interesting because once he gets like his mask falls off or whatever, it kind of deflates like a
It
balloon.
looks like he like disintegrates. Yeah,
Well,
kind
yeah,
of. He
so
he
I'm
pulled a he pulled an Obi-Wan. He just.
well, right, but that's never really happened before. So I'm really curious of like about that because I think that was an interesting call because that's how it comes off as is like him
Mhm.
kind of turning, becoming one with the force. But, you know, traditionally people who are on the dark side normally don't do that. So I'm really curious of what happened.
Yeah.
Um, because we only see that really happen to Yoda and Obi-Wan, like on screen anyways. Uh,
Yes.
but but seeing everything going down and just seeing that and seeing the brother of being like, listen, I'm sorry, but like I just like um the you also see early on that like he is for the empire and for like the and for the emperor and
Right. I feel
everything.
like he's yes, because they did like while they were working, having their lunches, they were chatting about the Empire. And to me, he just seemed like the hopeful person, like how everyone kind of was in the beginning about the Empire because they're basically the Republic, And so, they won. They were the good guys, like that was shown to be. And so they won. So they're like, oh yeah, everything's great. The Empire did this. And so it was like he was like in the hopeful stage that most people it shattered for them as time went on.
Yep. And we see him change his mind after he sees that the Inquisitor burns the entire
Right.
village and kills most of the
How
village, and
how
that
quick that happened. He
right.
was like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm. And then they are wondering what's going to happen next, and we see Ahsoka. We see later of possibly Tantive 4 shows up, and we learn that Ahsoka finally used her communicator. She ends up talking to Bale, and Bale's like, "Are you sure you're ready to join the fight?" And then like that kind of
yes." And
gets
that
that
was
story started, and her joining the
yeah, so
rebel cells and
she
everything.
that's kind of how it happened in the book as well. Like that's when she kind of officially joins
Yeah,
the rebellion. There's definitely obviously a lot more detail in the books, but essentially that's the gist.
yeah, yeah. And then that ends up being the end of the episode and the end of the hopefully season one. And the show was just the show was remarkable. I loved every
Mhm.
second of it. I wish we had more. I wish more episodes are made in the future. There's so
I just
I'm
have a feeling that that's not it.
no.
They're gonna do more. It was
There's
done
so many more
beautifully.
Jedi to talk about and explore.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I love for them to, dive deeper into Obi-Wan. I think that's a great Jedi to do.
Specifically younger Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
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 But
And
even like Plo Koon or
yeah, like Plo
Luminara, like,
Koon, Jit
there's just
Fisto.
so many. Yeah.
I think Quinlan Voss would also be a good one too.
Yes. Yep.
Because of you you could explore him going into like from him being a kid and like maybe his mission that he does during the Phantom Menace, and maybe Qui-Gon kind of sees him, like at the scene of the Phantom Menace where he's like sitting at the table and they cross paths. Maybe we learn about that mission. I think that would be cool. And then we do maybe a mission during the Clone Wars and him surviving Order 66, and then during the events of the Galactic Civil War, because we know that he's alive at that point. So I would love to see something like that. There's so many Jedi to explore. Tar Vizsla would probably be one of my top ones because we don't know that much about him. There's like not that much about him in canon. And the only thing that we know is that he was the first Mandalorian Jedi. He was the owner of the Darksaber, and then boom, like that's really it. So I would love to learn more history about that character. But again, there's so many characters to learn about and everything, and I think we'll see more of the show because this is something
Absolutely.
that I think that Dave Filoni's been wanting to do, and I think this will definitely be a success. And I can't wait to see what happens in season 2. But that's Tales of the Jedi. And not only that happened today, but the 8th episode of Andor. Um, we'll kind of do a light breakdown, and then David will come on later, and he'll do a full breakdown because I know there was a lot that he wanted to talk about.
I would like to
But
label these last two episodes just like a series of unfortunate events. Like,
yeah,
oh my gosh. Could you I just can't even imagine being Cassian, right? He's like escaped them for all of the said crimes that he has done, and to get captured for literally just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Oh, I was so sad. I was like, no.
yeah.
It's also just poor Cassian. I mean, obviously we know that he's going to get out of this, but how unfortunate.
Yep. And it definitely has been a journey for Cassian. You are definitely seeing him kind of falling into his thoughts, and you like see him get lost in his thoughts because he's like, I'm in prison, like I'm in the heart of the Empire right now. I didn't want to be here, and I'm here and not even like do anything to actually get in here. Like, and the way that they choose to torture the prisoners is the floor, and I think that's a very unique
It felt like a
way
very
to
Star Wars thing. Like
yeah.
it's like, you've never heard of that before. They're using some
No.
kind of like magnetic electrical current to
Yeah,
like
in the floor to introduce pain. It's like, oh dang, like that's like dark thinking.
and
And
it's almost kind of like messing with their minds as well, because when he gets to this special prison that he's been sent to, it's basically like a worker prison where they're putting them to work. Their cells don't have doors, so technically, like visually, they can look and they could be like, oh, I can just walk out. However, they step off onto that floor when it's active, they're literally dead. So I imagine that it's like not only like hard, but it's also like mentally
mhm.
that's really messing with them. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. So we see them bounce between a bunch of the different story arcs, and it's again, we're doing a very light breakdown because I know David wanted to do a full breakdown, so that episode will come later. But but I'm just seeing the different characters and more character growth and everything, and that just happened. And then the different introduction to characters like Andy Serkis.
Probably
Love
one of the last people I would have expected, but I was like, that's Andy Serkis.
it. It made me happy. It made me really happy seeing him. And for all those who are fans of Andy Serkis, you also know him in the Star Wars universe as Snoke. Um,
Oh, that's
and
right. I kind of
it's
forgot about that.
Yep, Snoke, and he's done a bunch of motion capture stuff too. Will he be doing that later in the show? Maybe we'll see.
We'll see. He's kind of like
But
the motion capture god.
yes, he is like the king of motion capture. Uh,
Yeah.
Yep. So we see him in charge of the prisoners and the way
He's a
that
prisoner himself. But what he
yes,
said, he has like less than 200 days left, so he's kind of like
yeah,
in their ranks, I guess. He's kind of like the leader of their certain little group
yeah,
of
231
workers.
days or something like that.
Yeah, something
But
like that.
um the way that it works is that there are five like rooms that work on different projects. Um and in the room that of prisoners that gets the most done during the day is rewarded with a better tasting food.
Hmm.
And that's kind of their motivation is to survive. And you see Cassian kind of struggle and kind of embrace his situation. uh, I think my biggest thing about the episode was there were prisoners that were doing some type of sign language. I don't think it was sign
Yeah,
language,
talking
but
to each other with like
yeah,
the separate like sectors. Like he's in his own
right,
little sector of prisoners, and there were more. And one
right.
of them was communicating. And the
And,
guards didn't seem to either notice or care.
and I'm really curious of what that's about. And I'm really curious on how Cassian's going to get out of there. Uh, And something else about the episode is you really see some of the characters kind of embrace of their situation, and then others like I'm done with this. And there's one that unfortunately does commit suicide, and he steps in the floor during the nighttime and he takes his life. And there's a lot of the prisoners that just don't care, and they're just like, oh great, like now our work situation will go down because we're missing a guy and he's dead, and it's gonna stink up the whole room for the rest of the night. And it's just like, wow, like they don't care. Like it's very interesting to see that side of uh of of the of the darker side of things in Star Wars, because I never thought I would ever see something like that happen in the Star Wars universe. This is definitely pointed towards the adult audience, um, which again I never thought I would really see. And I think the closest that I ever thought we would ever get was maybe in Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi, like of that theming. I never thought that we'd ever get to that point where it's more realistic, and it's having more real adult themes in there. So I'm very curious of what's going to happen in the next episode. Because then you see a couple of scenes with Mothma talking to her
Hmm.
friend about getting more funding for the rebellion, and then you see Luthen talking uh, talking to his assistant, because the character Bix is trying to reach out to them and try and find a Cassian, when in reality they're trying to find Cassian and kill
So, do you
him.
think Lucien wants him dead, or is that just because the assistant talked to, oh gosh, what's the blonde girl's name, and she told her to go find him and to kill him because he knows too much. Do you think Lucien is aware of this?
Yes. Yes.
and he wants him dead. Because that just doesn't
Yes.
seem correct to me.
Well, again, I I think things will kind of clash and like line up in the end. Um,
Because to me, it's just he knew that he was paying him to do this job.
yeah.
He should have known that he was kind of a flight risk, that he wasn't gonna like stay. There was always that risk.
The the plot of the entire show is I feel like is closing in to where like all stories are going to collide. I'm curious on how Cassian is going to escape the prison. Maybe it might have to do with Saw Gerrera because we, near the end of the episode we see Saw Gerrera, and it makes me really excited because of Forrest Whitaker was a great um uh, he was a great addition to the Star Wars universe, and the fact that he's playing a character that was established in the Clone Wars made it even better. And having him dive deeper into his character and just the scenes that he had in this episode, where uh, Luthen is asking him to help out someone that's in a rebel cell that used to be a separatist, and he wants nothing to do with it. He's like, and it's because of they killed his sister, um, and he doesn't care what faction that they are part of now. He cares about where they were in the war and the Clone Wars, and that's very obvious. So I'm it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next couple of episodes um,
Mm-hmm.
because he's so power driven by freedom, and he doesn't care how he gets it because of he is a loose cannon, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens next. But that was the main plot of those of that episode. There was just Cassian was dealing with a lot. They were dealing with different financing stuff on Coruscant and Mon Mothma, and then they were trying to find out where um, where Cassian is, including the Empire. The Empire is trying to hunt him down at this point, and it's funny
Right.
because
He's become a very big person of
yeah,
interest to them now
yep,
because shoot, the blonde Imperial, I'm terrible with names today. She's all up in there. She is tearing down barriers, and she's like, something's
Hadrian
going on.
Mirdo, yeah, is her name.
Mira? Is it Mira? Something like that, yes.
Mirdo, Meerdo.
What? Anyway,
Yeah.
uh, because she pulled that guy from, oh my goodness.
His name is Cyril.
Yes, she pulled him out of his poor little office desk job that he just got to make some money. His space like suit,
Tie.
his work suit and tie, that cracked me up. That was so funny.
Mm-hmm.
But she pulled him out and was asking him about the report and the incident, and he was like telling her everything.
Yeah. So I'm and it's funny because they're all looking for him, and it's funny especially on the Empire side because um
They
he's
have
in
him, yeah.
yeah, he's in prison by the Empire, and it's right underneath their nose, and if they find out that they had him in their prison the entire time, that's going to be really, really funny, and very embarrassing at the same time. But I'm excited to see where the next couple episodes go because all of these events are leading into Rogue One, so you will definitely see more well-known characters, and them going to Yavin. I'm hoping to see some cameos from Star Wars Rebels, maybe by the end of the show or like in season 2, because all of those like paths are lining up. So
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be super cool to see how like things play out. But that's Andor. Again, David will come and do a full breakdown of it.
Deeper
But
dive.
yeah, yeah. And then to finish our lovely episode that we had here today, Brooke and I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting Ashley Eckstein. This was Brooke's first time
It was.
meeting her, and she is one of the most nicest people,
Oh, she
down to
was
earth,
lovely. Yes.
kind-hearted. Yeah.
Something that so what it was for, it was she over in Orlando, she did a book signing of her new, it's kind of like it's called live oh my gosh, babe, what's it called? Like
Of the book,
yes. Like
uh, it's called Star Wars Every Day.
Star Wars Every Day. Thank you. And it's basically it's like a bunch of like she's broken up by months, and so there's like activities, like mindfulness things you can do, recipes, and just all Star Wars themed. Very cool. And so she signed copies, so we have a beautiful signed copy. And then she did a meet and greet with everyone who came and purchased the book. And what I loved is that, I think we've all done meet and greets where it's kind of like a love and shove kind of situation. You say hello, get a picture, and leave. She took the time
She took her
to
time.
say hello, like just talk to you. And I just appreciated that so much because it just showed how amazing and down to earth and how much she cares about her fans. And so it's very amazing. I got to show her my tattoos. She
Mhm.
loved them. And she also said that Colin and I were a cute couple, so I'm putting that on my resume now. We are a Ahsoka Tano, Ashley Eckstein confirmed cute couple.
That's canon. Yep. But yeah. So
Oh,
I'm
something else that was very cool. Don't forget the 501st, the Orlando Garrison. Yeah,
the Florida Garrison was there.
Florida Garrison.
I have I've I've seen a couple of them before, but
So
it was great seeing
they
them
had
again.
some
Yeah,
Jawas, Vader, troopers,
I don't know who
Anakin.
I don't know who the Jawas were, but they were doing a great job.
Oh my gosh, they were so funny. One of them kept coming around and they kept stealing stuff. And I was like, "Yo, what are you doing? You got to trade." And they just kind of looked at me and they're like, "Oh, you're right." And they like gave the stuff back. They were great. It was
Yeah,
so wonderful. It was such a fun little thing for people to come and do.
yeah, and that kind of added to our Star Wars experience today,
Hmm.
and it kind of felt like we were back at Star Wars Celebration, waking up at the crack of dawn, of just doing Star Wars stuff, and then like we even did a meet and greet. So that was really cool. And then today we're ending the day by going to Galaxy's Edge and just kind of exploring and walking around. So it I love when things like this happen because it puts your fandom into perspective, and then also it just sparks it even more. Uh, and and it's awesome that we talked to Ashley Eckstein yesterday, and then we saw her in Tales of the Jedi as Ahsoka today.
Yes.
So very cool. Uh, we appreciate all you being fans of the podcast, listening to us, being part of a Patreon. We would not be
Yeah,
doing this if it wasn't for you.
we want to give a
Um,
little shout out to our buddy Tyler, who we met
yeah,
yesterday. Super
we
cool to meet you.
we're very thankful to all the fans that came up to us. We had a couple of groups come up and say hi and stuff, and so we love hearing back from you guys. We love meeting you, seeing you. If you ever see us like anywhere, if it's grocery shopping
Oh,
or at the
say
parks or
hi.
anything, come say hi. Come say hi. We love talking to you. We're on Facebook. We have the Star Wars Stuff group and Star Wars Stuff podcast page. We're on Instagram at Star Wars Stuff Podcast, Twitter at Stuff Pod, TikTok, search Star Wars Stuff. We also have an email, Star Wars Stuff Podcast at gmail.com. And please go on Apple Podcasts and give us a review. We love hearing back from you and your honesty. And we also have our own website, stuffpodcastnetwork.com. We're on Twitch, SW Stuff 77. There's so much to look forward to in the Star Wars universe, and at the end of November is when like Star Wars is taking a break for a month, and then it picks up back up again on January 4th. That's when the first episode of season 2 of the Bad Batch comes out, so we're looking forward to that.
We're
We
gonna
are
take a little holiday break. A little holiday break. Enjoy your
Yeah,
holidays, and then we're gonna get right back in it.
yep, because that's a huge like for next year, it's a huge year for Star Wars. You've got Bad Batch season 2, you've got Jedi Survivor, you've got Mandalorian, you've got Ahsoka, you have not Tales of the Jedi, you have Skeleton
Surprise.
Crew, you have Willow, you have Indiana Jones 5, even those two aren't Star Wars, but there's a lot to look forward to next year, and we can't wait to go on this crazy ride with you all. So thank you so much for listening and being a fan of the podcast. We will talk to you soon. May the force be with you always.
Always.